you probably would have heard of something known as vaping, where people who want to quit smoking will vape. It's because it is touted as a less harmful way to get nicotine and have that in your bloodstream and doing the things that it does to your body, because it's quite an addictive substance. So people rely on it quite a lot. They develop a reliance on it because their brain is so used to the stimulation that it gives it, so it can't really live without it in a weird stretch of the imagination. It's touted as less harmful, and while that is true, it doesn't contain the tars and stuff that a lot of cigarette smoke contains, and it won't make your lungs necessarily as black as cigarettes would, with all the black lungs and the tar, the hydrocarbons, which isn't good news whatsoever. It's still going to contain a load of harmful chemicals that you wouldn't have possibly thought of before. Flavorings are the main new chemical. You would have heard of all the fancy, colourful, flavors of vaping that is the reason that so many people are attracted to it. It's a good marketing technique, I suppose. Obviously, the flavors as well, they will use flavorings, and these are all loads and loads of different chemicals that over 7,000 or something have been used in vapes. And while there aren't over 7,000 vapes, these flavorings are used in combinations to give specific flavors. But yeah, it's very hard to find some of these chemicals out, because if you look at a vape packet, which I hope you don't have, it will say I think there's a couple of chemicals that I've done my research on, glycerin, isopropylene glycol, and then it will say natural and synthetic flavorings. They're not legally binded to name the specific ones inside of the packet, because it would take a long time and it would potentially deter people if people could find out. But this is a disbarred knowledge from the general public. It's very hard to find out which natural flavorings there are, but I have come up with a couple, and I'm going to go through some of the base chemicals that are inside of basically every single vape to make the actual e-cigarette liquid. Now, while I'm not actually going to talk about anything to do with the e-liquid for the first chemical that's found inside of a vapor in a way, now this is actually metals, and a bit different to the metals that are found inside of cigarette smoke. That was more arsenic, cadmium, chromium. These ones are more tin, nickel, aluminium, because the way that vapes actually work, which I hope you don't know about, is it will heat the e-cigarette liquid using metal coils. This is going to mean that when vapor goes up, it's going to take some of the tiny particulates of metal ions with it, which means that you ingest it, which means that it may go into your bloodstream and do bad things. Nickel, tin, and aluminium are anti-nutrients. They're toxic metals, which if you do continue to vape, they will build up and accumulate in your system, which isn't good news for you whatsoever. They're basically, the way that anti-nutrients work is they fit aluminium or something, for instance. Aluminium or something, for instance, will fit into an enzyme lock or some kind of thing, and it will basically reserve its space there. It won't be able to complete the mechanism and allow it to do the good thing, and it just means that the actual good chemicals can't do the good thing because aluminium is stuck there. That's how anti-nutrients work. Now, one of the main baseline chemicals inside of vapes is known as propylene glycol, and obviously when e-cigarette liquid, I think it's probably around 30 to 50% propylene glycol. It can create on a small amount something known as propylene oxide, which is a known carcinogen, which means that in some stretch of the imagination, vaping does cause cancer, even though it's touted as to not necessarily cause as much of a damage to your lungs as things like cigarette smoke, which could potentially be true, but there is so little understood to the fullest extent about vaping and what it actually does to the human body that we kind of just have to hedge our bets and hope that it is pretty bad, because obviously there it is going to kill you eventually. It's not going to save your life. It's not completely harm-free. It's not going to be good for you whatsoever, especially with the fact that children and stuff consistently vape, and that's just going to do a whole wide variety of things that, aside from the cancer, propylene glycol itself is just a straight up irritant. It will cause mucus buildup because of the irritation. It causes fat buildup inside of the lungs. Just not good news in general. As a side note, vape liquid, the e-cigarette liquid, if you drunk it, which please for goddamn whateverness, just don't, because you'd be an absolute fool to do so. It is you will die if you take even the tiniest drop of it. That's how poisonous this stuff is. That's how many weird chemicals contain. That's what I mean about how different things, if you already eat something, it can be incredibly poisonous, but if you inhale it, it's all right. If it's a vapor, then it's fine. If it goes into your lungs, it's not going to kill you as fast, I suppose. But if you do drink vape liquid, which for God's sake don't, then it will just kill you, and yeah, you probably don't want that. Now, the third category of chemicals that exist inside of vape vapor is flavorings. Now, obviously, I've mentioned this before, but this is what I'm going to talk about for the rest of the video. As I say, over 7,000 flavorings that exist inside of vapes in combinations, and sometimes there's just like one. Things like benzaldehyde is a well-known compound that causes a nice cherry flavor used inside of some like cherry sodas and stuff. They also won't, like, they're not legally binded to mention this on any kind of food product. If it says like natural flavors and stuff, they're not legally binded to say that it's benzaldehyde on a cherry Coke drink. They just straight up don't have to do that. And that's probably good news, because the list will just go on, because that's how synthetic some of this stuff is. Now, the first category of flavorings is things known as saccharides. Now, these are chemicals and flavorings that make things sweet. They will make the sweet, fruity vape flavors. While you may have specific apple flavors, you may have specific blueberry flavors, you will also just have like saccharin, or I think it's saccharide specifically, that might be in that branch of chemicals. And that just makes the vape taste sweet. It's going to attract all the children that currently vape. It's going to attract people that haven't even smoked before to vape. Because realistically, while it may save a lot of people from smoking, the trouble is that it's attracting a whole variety of people that have never smoked before onto vaping, because it's like such a colourful, cool, new thing to do. Which is, yeah, it's weird. That's just how it works. And saccharides, I'm going to keep on getting confused with this. When they are heated, as e-cigarette liquid is, degrade into furans and aldehydes. As I say, formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, known to cause cancer. There's things like 4-H&E, known to cause cancer, which is another aldehyde. But there's no known specific ones, because there's also no known specific saccharides which go with specific vape flavors, because they're not legally binded to say this kind of thing, and research isn't being done on this kind of stuff, because there's so much to really unpick and understand. There's quite a few chemicals that I could specifically find on just general like flavorings, like benzaldehyde, for instance, cinnamic acid, for instance. I don't know if there's any cinnamon vape flavors, but... And then the second B category of flavorings is diacetyl and acetylpropionyl. These are two flavorings that are used to make the buttery, creamy flavored vapes, which I never had even fathomed could even possibly exist before. And an interesting thing to note is a story about these chemicals. There was an analysis done where a lot of people that worked at popcorn factories suffered with a lot of like coughing and permanent pulmonary obstruction from these chemicals being released inside of the factory. And when this stuff is inhaled, because this isn't just oral ingestion, this is the same kind of thing, this is inhalation. They had pulmonary like obstruction, scarring, permanent. You can't get rid of it. You can't just stop vaping and then it will all go away and be nice and happy again. You are stuck with this stuff for the rest of your life. So I beg you to just use your head and use some common sense, and to realize that there's no good reason to vaping other than a tiny bit of enjoyment that just is going to not end up helping you at all in the future. So I beg you to use your head, and I do recommend subscribing to get more content like this and allow this community of young, troubled people who are willing to improve themselves so much more than they already have, and good luck.